Like I said, I come from the Directorate, Agriculture Inputs Control, and our mandate is to implement Act 36 of 1947. And our act, it actually regulates fertilizers, farm feeds, stock remedies. Stock remedies, the other way of saying it is to say it's animal medicine, and agricultural remedies, which is pesticides in general. If you go to a shop, you buy any other pesticides, including household pesticides, probably, in all likelihood, that pesticides would have went through our hands. We would have evaluated it if it's fit for purpose and is not harmful to the environment and human health. Now, how do we fit into the bigger picture in South Africa? Our job is to support innovation and to expedite time to market for safe and quality pesticides, animal medicine, fertilizers, and animal feeds in agricultural production to further the well-being of South Africa's people, environment, and the economy. Now, we achieve this by making sure that the agricultural inputs, which is fertilizers, farm feeds, animal medicine, and pesticides, have got a unique registration number. Like I said, if you go and look at the back of your pesticides, what you are going to see is L registration. It will be L 4567 Act 36 of 1947. If there are people who come from the agricultural industry here, they will understand that fertilizers, they've got a B number, and farm feeds, they've got a V number. So if you buy anything that is not registered according to our act, then it means that the risk of that product is not yet understood or known, and you are in contravention of the law. Now, when we evaluate applications which are made, normally our clients is the private sector, the chemical industry mostly. We evaluate our applications in conjunction with the Department of Health that look at maximum residual limits. We also take in consideration other acts like the Explosives Act and the National Environment Management Act and NEMBA. But we also look at other conventions that South Africa is a signatory to, which some of them have already been mentioned. I heard the Basel Convention on Hazardous Chemicals and Pesticides. It has already been mentioned. The Stockholm Convention on POPs and the Montreal Convention, the Montreal Protocol on Substances that Deplete the Ozone Layer. And lately, we have another convention that South Africa is a signatory to, which is the Nagoya Protocol, that we look into when we register agricultural products. So basically, our industry is one of the highly regulated industry in South Africa. Now, for one, I come from the fertilizer side of our directorate. So I'm a technical advisor, and I work specifically with fertilizers, the registration and any other thing that relates to fertilizers. Now, our definition of a fertilizer according to our act is anything which is intended or offered to be used for improving or maintaining the growth of plants or the productivity of the soil. This may include natural or synthetic products like plant growth regulators. It may include copolymers, urease inhibitors, plant extracts, seaweed, chelating and complexing agents. Now, when I was invited here, I thought I should talk about complexing and chelating agents as a developing market or developing products in the country, but not in the country, but the whole world, because we work with other regulators in other countries like the EU and the US EPA and the Japanese regulators and the Australian regulators. But then I decided that I'm going to talk about nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Of course, Natalie has already spoken in length about them, but I'm going to look at them from a different angle. But before I go there, I just want to highlight that plant nutrients, we've got basically about 6 macronutrients, and of those, we've got the ones that we call structural, the hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen, and we've got nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and calcium, and magnesium, and sulfur. Those, the primary ones is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And calcium, sulfur, and magnesium, we refer to them as secondary plant nutrients. Now, in conjunction with those, if you are into crop production, you will know that there are other micronutrients or trace elements that are required for successful operations in farms. Chlorine, boron, magnesium, iron, zinc, cobalt, nickel, and molybdenum. I've highlighted cobalt and nickel there because those two, they are also regarded as toxic elements or elements of concern because they can be toxic to plants and they can be toxic to human beings. But that does not mean that zinc and copper and probably phosphorus, they can also be toxic to plants and they can be toxic to human beings in excess. Now, most of the sources of plant nutrients on the table, if you look there, most of the nutrients, they come from mining, other than nitrogen, which is obtained through the Haber-Bosch process, and sulfur, which most of the sulfur that we use in the country and the world over, it comes from the cleaning of fossil fuels. I'm sorry, I'm catching flu, so hopefully you'll bear with me. Now, on the right is the source and the possible minerals that this macronutrients and micronutrients occur in the soil. For example, we've got calcium. You can get it from, thank you. You can get, thank you, I'll take this. Calcium, for example, we get it from limestone, and molybdenum, you get it from molybdenite, and zinc, you get it, usually we get it from zinc oxide. I don't know what is the other source of the raw rock material of zinc in geological terms, how they mine it and how they get it. Now, there's 6 basic nutrients that we consider that we work with in fertilizers. Like I said, is nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, calcium, and magnesium. Those 6, they are the most important, and they are usually extracted by plants at around neutral pH, soil pH conditions. Now, sulfur, calcium, and magnesium, like I said, they're secondary. So in this presentation, I'm going to concentrate on nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. Now, of all the main plant nutrients, there are 5 main plant nutrients. And the 3, they are the ones that are critical for human survival, because nitrogen in the atmosphere, we've got about 80%, close to 80% take just slightly up, about less than 80%, but the nitrogen that is in the atmosphere is not available to use by plants or human beings because it's strongly bonded in covalent bonds. Now, the production of these plant nutrients started in earnest during the Industrial Revolution, but after the Great Wars, companies that produced explosive, mostly nitrates, they had to seek new markets in the world, and the new markets were found in the production of fertilizers. In South Africa, because we're not involved that much in the wars, our fertilizer industry is interlinked to our mining sector. If you think about companies like Sasol, Omnia, and Fosco. But in other countries and worldwide, these companies, they developed because initially they were producing explosives for the world wars. Now, I'm going to look at nitrogen first. Now, this is the most abundant gas in the atmosphere, and it constitutes close to 78%. And even though it is as abundant as I said, unfortunately is that it is not available to plants. And because of the triple bonds between the two nitrogen atoms that are, I want to put it in an easier way, but okay, yeah, but it's N2. The two nitrogen atoms, they are linked together in a triple covalent bonds, and that bond is very strong. You cannot break it until you use the Haber-Bosch process. And then without the industrial production of nitrogen, agricultural production at the current level would not be possible. I'll show you just now, because if you look at the world population as things stand, we are at about 7.7 billion people in the world. And the production of nitrogen through the Haber-Bosch process is about more than 80% of the nitrogen that is used in agriculture. The rest of the nitrogen that we use is organic nitrogen, and the other one is the one that is fixed by leguminous plants, and very minute quantities is fixed by lightning in the atmosphere, and probably microorganisms. Now, if you look at the production of ammonia, in 1945, the production was less than 10 times 10 to the power 6. How is that? Is 10, the number is 10 million, eh? Yeah, it was less than 10 million, but as we stand, we are at more than 150 million tons production level in the world. That is because of population expansion and the boom in population in the world. Now, this is another graph that shows us the production of ammonia compared to the other sources that I said that is fixed by leguminous plants, and the other one that is fixed by microorganisms. If you look at it, the production through the Haber-Bosch process dwarf the other nitrogen sources by a huge margin. Now, I want to highlight the disadvantages of having nitrogen, of using fertilizer nitrogen. In our environment, The first thing is that it acidifies the soils, and as it acidifies the soils, it makes the soils to be less productive, which means it's less profit for farmers, and it makes the soils to be sterile by killing the soil microorganisms, that soil microflora and microfauna. Another thing is nitrogen compounds. They are greenhouse gases, which increase the global warming, and we know, and nitrogen compounds, they are about 10 to 20 times or more. They can absorb more heat compared to carbon in the atmosphere. Now, the other thing that is of a negative impact is due to eutrophication of our water sources. Eutrophication is when usually nitrates and phosphates, they end up in our water sources and creating a good environment for plants that are usually invasive species to grow in the water and use all of the oxygen to such an extent that the fish that is in dams and other and rivers, they cannot get enough oxygen for survival. Now, soil acidification. If you look, most of soils in South Africa are soils and have been rendered less productive due to overuse of nitrogen fertilizers. And this is going to take millions, if not billions, to fix it to the original state. I don't know if we can get back to the original state, but it's going to take a lot of money to get it back to productive states. And because of that, too, when the soil is acidic, it means less plants can grow on the soils, and there will be less soil organic matter, and toxic minerals, toxic metals in the soils under acidic conditions, they get released in the soil. Toxic metals, I'm talking about manganese, iron, copper, zinc. They are found in soils under normal conditions, but once you make the soils to be acidic, they become more mobile in the soil and they get into the food system, and the levels of those metals in our food system, it gets elevated. And although, like Natalie said, we do need these metals for survival, but in excess, we are going to encounter problems. And the acidification itself, it also increases the cost of crop production, which further increase the food prices in the market. And it's also the issues of other environmental concerns. For example, if you've got nitrates that leach into groundwaters, and you can end up with water that has got high nitrate levels, you might end up having what we call blue baby disease. Now, when I started working, I worked in Limpopo. There was a time when we were giving farmers fertilizers for free, and they abused the fertilizers to such an extent that there was too much fertilizer in the water where the livestock was drinking water, and unfortunately a lot of livestock died. And when they did post-mortem, they found that there was too much nitrates in the water that they were drinking. So those are some of the financial and economic impacts it can have. Now, if you look at the extent of soil acidification in South Africa, you'll see the eastern part of South Africa is usually more acidic than the western part of South Africa. Is because of rainfall. Soil acidity decreases, or let me say increases, with rainfall, and is also a factor of temperature.